Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I am starting a series today called Two's Company. In this series, I'm going to teach you how to take your scrap stash and make two very simple scrappy blocks, but take those blocks and in this quilt, lay them out in such a way that you create a beautiful design that you wouldn't have thought possible with two very simple blocks. So let's see how that's done. We're going to grab our scraps. I'm going to let you know what you're going to need for this particular quilt. I'll show that to you here in just a second on the quilt on the table. And let's get started. All right, before we get started, for those of you who do not have your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, and ready to use, I do have a Speedy Solutions book set. These are my Speedy Solutions techniques. They teach you step by step how to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and ready to use to make beautiful quilts. I also have a corresponding video on my YouTube channel. I'll have that all linked below for the books and the video so that you can go ahead and watch that, and it'll help you get your stash ready to use. So this techniques book and this patterns book together have not only all of the techniques, but also a total of 17 scrappy patterns from which you can make some beautiful quilts from your very own stash. Now let's take a peek at the quilt that I'm working on. This is called Braided Blessings. Isn't it beautiful? And it's simply using two blocks here. This is the monkey wrench and this is the hourglass block. It's very simple blocks. And as you know, every quilt block that's out there has a couple of different names. It depends on the area of the world or the country in which you live. They're very simple blocks. I'm going to show you in a minute what you can pull from your stash to make them. But isn't it gorgeous? It looks as if these blocks are braided or woven within one another. I just think it's a wonderful design that it creates. And I will have this pattern out on my website as an individual pattern, hopefully by this weekend. We're getting ready to head out on vacation, but I'm hoping to get it finalized and get it out there for you. This is part of a devotional book that I'll be writing, and so this pattern will also be in that book. But there's going to be 10 to 12 different patterns within that book. So that's going to be taking me a number of months to write and finalize. But I will have it as an individual pattern. Just give me time to get it out there. Today, what I'm going to share with you is how you can actually make these two blocks and what you'll need to pull from your stash. Let me move this out of the way. So here we have the monkey wrench block. I made it with scraps from my stash. And here we have the hourglass block, which I just simply pulled scraps from my stash. And for these two blocks and for this pattern, you really want to grab lights and darks. Try and stay away from the mediums if at all possible, but they'll still work. But the lights and the darks will really give it that contrast so that the designs will pop for you. So now let's take a look at what we need. First of all, we'll look at the monkey wrench block and see what we need for that. Go to your stash and grab your 3.5-inch bin. You need that of squares, 3.5-inch bin. Go to your stash and grab the 4.5-inch bin. You need that. Go to your stash and grab your 5-inch bin, and go to your stash and grab your 7-inch bin. So 3.5, 4.5, 5, and 7.5. That's what you're going to need. Now, let me break this down for this first block here. Move that out of the way. Okay, so for the monkey wrench, you're going to need one 4.5-inch light. Oops, let me make sure this is in the center. My apologies there. You need a 4.5-inch light for the center. So you'll need that. And then for these rectangles, there's a couple of different ways you can actually obtain those. If you have some lights and darks that are in strips of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide, grab those strips and then you'll subcut 4.5-inch lengths from them. You can sew a dark with a light and you can subcut 4.5-inch lengths. What I did is I went to my 5-inch squares. I grabbed two darks, two lights, and I simply am going to take those and cut them in half. So they end up being 2.5 by 5. And then I'm just going to get rid of a 1/2 inch. So I'll cut them in half. I'll have 4 darks and 4 lights that are rectangles, but I just simply have to cut off 1/2 inch because what I need is a total of 4 darks, 2.5 by 4.5, and 4 lights, 2.5 by 4.5. As you can see here, there are the 4 lights, here are the 4 darks. So that's the rectangles, and for me, I'm pulling them from 5-inch squares. And then we're going to make half square triangles. And we're also going to use 5-inch squares to make those half square triangles. So for each block, you're going to pull 2 darks and you're going to pull 2 lights. And you're simply going to place them right sides together. And we've done this many, many times on my channel. And then you're going to draw a diagonal line across the center. You're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of those diagonal lines and all the way back. Then you're going to cut it on the diagonal line. You're going to open it, press it, square it up to 4.5 inches. Each one of these pieces within, or these units within the block, is 4.5 inches. So that's how you make the 4 half square triangles. And I will do this here in just a moment out on my sewing machine so that you'll see how that's done. So that is what you need for the monkey wrench. Let's see what you need for the hourglass. So for that one, you are going to need to pull a total of 4 dark 3.5 inch squares. And that's to run down the very center here. Those are the darks, 3.5 inch squares. You're going to need 4 3.5 inch lights, and those are the 4 3.5 inch lights right there, okay? Then we're going to make large half square triangles, and this is where you need to pull those 7-inch squares, and you only need 1 dark and 1 light per block because each of these units creates both halves of your half square triangle. Put them right sides together. Again, draw a diagonal line, so a scant 1/4 inch on both sides, cut them apart, open them, square them up. They need to be squared up to 6.5 inches, 6.5 inches. This unit needs to be 6.5 inches. This unit needs to be 6.5 inches. And then you can put it together. Each of these blocks ends up being 12.5 inches unfinished. Now, let me show you how to piece these together. All right, for the hourglass block here, I've got my 4 patches laid out with my darks. They're going to run through the center. And when I take this to my sewing machine, I am simply going to flip these over, and start stitching, and just keep on stitching down. I'll probably do all 4 of these at the same time. And then I will disconnect them right here. I'll cut them apart right there. And then I will have this set and this set, which I can then sew together in the other direction. And I'll show you that in just a minute. I'll take this to the machine and show you how that's done. I also have the 2 7-inch squares. I drew a diagonal line on from one corner to the other. I sewed a scant 1/4 inch. I'm not sure if you can see the stitching on that side better or on this side, but I sewed a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that line. And now I can take my ruler and cut on the line. There we go. And I end up with 2 half square triangles here, which I need to get squared up. And they will both go into the center. Let's see, is the dark is on the outside. So these will go on the outside here. And we'll put these together just like that. So these are the pieces I need for the hourglass block. Now, to get these half square triangles squared up, and it's so important that you square up each and every half square triangle whenever you make them for a quilt. You might not have to remove too much of the excess fabric, but it's important that you do so because even a little 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch of excess fabric can cause your blocks to be a nightmare to try to put together. So I am using my Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer. I really love this thing. There's so many different ways you can square up a triangle. You can use a square. If you're using an actual square with a diagonal line, then you would need to press this open, and you could either press your seam allowance toward the dark or you could press it open, whichever you prefer. Because I am using this Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, I will simply keep this as a triangle first. Then I'm going to line up that the stitching line there on the stitching line of the unit itself, and I'm going to trim away the excess. And what I need is to have a half square triangle that measures 6.5 inches. So those are the measurements that I'm using. And so here we go. Now I can take this to my iron and get it pressed. Let me do the other one real quick, get that out of the way. All of this can be put in your pet pillow as stuffing. You don't have to throw this away. You can certainly save that in your pet pillow as stuffing. It's nice and small, and so that will make a nice bed for a pet. Instead of throwing chunks of fabric in your pet pillow for stuffing, make sure you sew, or that you throw smaller pieces. Okay, let me get this one. Also, in my techniques book, in that small techniques book, this book here, I do have a pattern for the pet pillow. You can certainly make up that pattern and then clip it or hang it on the side of your cutting table. And that way, as you're working, you can throw those excess pieces into your pet pillow, and that's a great place for them. All right, so I've got my half square triangles are ready to go. Now we are going to sew these units. I'm going to take them to my sewing machine, like I said, and I'm going to sew them together. I'm not going to break threads. I want to sew this unit together. I'll probably continue and sew this next unit as well as I'm stitching. And then what I will do is cut the two units apart, and then I'll be able to open them up and sew them together one more time. I'll show you that. Let me get these first lines of stitching ready, and then I'll bring it back so that it makes sense for you. All right, so I have these squared up, and I have them trimmed to 6.5 inches. I also have sewn these two 4 patches. Let me bring them both together here for you. And I continued sewing down. I disconnected them here so that I have 2 units. And what I'm going to do then, and you can do this, it's called chain stitching, assembly line, whatever you want to call it, but you can do this for all of your blocks at one time. It's a fast way to get everything done. But now you'll see that I have the 4 patches here, and all I need to do then is flip them together. They're connected by a thread there. There's a thread that's connected them. And I can simply hold this, I'll nest the seams, putting the darks to each side there, and I'll bring it back to my machine and stitch. I'll do the same thing over here. Nest the seams, darks to the, press the seam allowances to the dark, and bring it to the machine and stitch 1/4 inch. And then I'll have both of these 4 patch units finished. And then I'll need to square each of these 4 patch units up to 6.5 inches. Let me stitch those lines. I'll bring it right back. All right, I've stitched a line of stitching. We've got the 2 4 patches done. I am going to separate them. And what you can do if you would like to make a pinwheel of your center seam allowance here, I've taught this many times as well, but find that little thread that connected those blocks in the previous seam allowance. Snip that thread and then twist those seam allowances, and you'll automatically see a little pinwheel forming there. See that? There's the pinwheel forming already. And then you can press your seams. In this case, my seams are going to get pressed clockwise. It depends on the last seam allowance that you stitch. It might be that your seams are going to have to be pressed counterclockwise. In this case, they need to be pressed clockwise, and it just will automatically lay nicely like that. So I'm going to go ahead and press them like that and square that up. Here's the second one. This is the second 4 patch unit. I'm going to clip that seam, flip it open there. There is my little pinwheel right there. See that? And again, I'm going to be pressing my seams clockwise all the way around. So let me go do that and square things up, and I'll bring it back and show you how we're going to put the block together. All right, so I have my 4 patches and my half square triangles lined up here for this hourglass block. And I'm going to web this block just like I always do. I'm going to flip this block over and start at the top. For me, this is the top. For you, it's the bottom. But when you get it to your machine, start at the top, stitch down, flip this one over, continue stitching. And then when you open it, just pretend that these pieces are connected, these pieces are connected. Then you just have to flip the top over the bottom, and you can sew this seam allowance as well. It's a very simple way and a great way to put together your blocks and or your quilts by webbing them, because then everything stays in order. Nothing gets cattywampus within the block or within the quilt. So I finished this hourglass block. It is ready to go. Set it aside, and now I'm going to start working on my second monkey wrench block. And so I've got 2 lights, 2 darks, 5-inch squares here, 2 lights, 2 darks, 5-inch squares here. I think what I'm going to do is make my stripes out of the reds and lights, and I'll make my half square triangles out of the greens and the lights. So that's what I plan to do. So here's what I'm going to do to accomplish that. I'm going to line up these 5-inch squares. And ultimately, there's 4 of them here, 2 lights, 2 darks. What I need is rectangles that measure 2.5 by 4.5. And so what I can simply do is cut these 5-inch squares in half. So now I have 2.5 by 5. And so I can simply cut off a 1/2 inch so that I have a 4.5-inch length. And this right here can also go in your pet pillow, that little bit right there. So nothing has to go in the trash. All right, so what we're going to do with every one of these rectangles is we're going to sew a light with a dark and a light with a dark. So I'll go ahead and get that done. We'll sew those together, and once we get them sewn, then they need to be squared up to 4.5 inches. Each of these must be 4.5 inches, so they'll be squares. So I'll do that in a moment. Let's take a look at the half square triangle units. Again, very simply, we are going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner, and I'm just using a pen because it's going to become the cutting line. There's that one. Line this up. Diagonal line, corner to corner. So I'm going to take all of this to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew the rectangles. I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of this drawn line. I'll bring it all back. All right, so I have my rectangles sewn together. Got all 4 of those sewn, and I have my half square triangles sewn together. When I cut apart my half square triangles, I do like to cut off the ends here, stitching line to stitching line. It just gets rid of excess fabric. So what I'm going to do here is cut there and cut there from stitching line to stitching line. It just gets rid of those dog ears. So that's how I like to cut my half square triangle units apart. And so those are cut that way. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut them with a rotary cutter down the center. And I will have 2 half square triangle units per unit here. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the half square triangles squared up to 4.5 inches and pressed, and I'm going to square up these rectangle units to 4.5 inches. All right, so I have all of the units ready to go. They're squared up to 4.5 inches. So I have the 4 half square triangles, the 4 rectangle units, and then the 4.5-inch square in the center. Now, my Scrappy block is kind of matchy-matchy because I'm just making one block at a time. If you were to make all of these units at once for as many blocks as you choose to make, for as large as you want your quilt to be, then you can mix and match everything. So you could grab 4 different half square triangles and 4 different rectangle units. And the same could hold true here. You could use 4 different 4-patch units and 2 different half square units so that each and every block is completely different, very scrappy. Or if you like using something that is a little bit more matchy-matchy, maybe this is what you'd prefer to do. There is more of a resting place here for your eyes because there are repetitive colors or values that are happening here. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and sew this together. I am going to square it up to 12.5 inches also. And then I'm going to share with you how these rows go together to create those braids, that braided blessing look. I can't seem to get my camera up high enough to share the whole row, but I'll bring my camera around here in a moment. I do want to point out before I do that, the wonderful thing about these blocks is that none of these inside areas in the blocks have to match. It's great. So you're only matching the block seam allowances on the outside. Nothing in here matches. So that is a great blessing with this particular design as well. So you're going to put together each row using every other block, the hourglass block and the monkey wrench block. This is the hourglass and these are the monkey wrenches. The thing that makes the braid, this is what creates the braid. For the first row, I'm going to have all of my hourglass blocks going where the dark diagonal is going in this direction. And then for the second row, all of my hourglass blocks will have the darks going in the opposite direction. That creates that beautiful braid look to the quilt. So simple. That's all there is to it. Just laying out however many blocks you want. I'm going to do four rows of 4 in mine. But the only thing you have to change is flipping each row in the hourglass block. So in this row, I would have everything going this direction, and then the next row, I would have these darks going in this direction. How easy is that? So I think this kind of gives you a better idea if you'll put this row together with your darks going in this direction, your dark squares, and then the top row, you're putting that row together with the darks going in that direction. And you'll see that that braid is already developing there, even with just these 4 blocks in 2 rows. It's going to be a lovely quilt. I can't wait to get it finished and add borders. The pattern itself is a lap dimensions 66 by 78, and then a queen dimensions are 87 by 99, and this just involves some straight borders there. Very simple, nothing extravagant, but it will be a lot of fun to put this together. Once I've got the entire inside together, then I will audition different fabrics from my stash and identify which color border I plan to use. I have learned with Scrappy quilts like this, I don't pull yardage for my borders until after my entire center is finished, and then I'll grab a number of different fabrics from my stash and audition those to see what really works the best. And frequently I will put a white or a light colored inside border inside before the colored border. That's just something that I've done, and I really do enjoy that. So this is Braided Blessings. I hope that you'll all make it. Make sure to grab your scrap stash in those different square sizes, 3.5, 4.5, 5, and 7. And if you don't have your stash put together yet, make sure that you either go through the book or the video that I have that corresponds to that book and get your scrap stash cut, sorted, and ready to use to make some beautiful quilts. I will post a finished quilt of the Braided Blessings out on my YouTube channel. You'll see a post coming up, and I'll try to do that frequently on various quilts that I have been working on. Obviously it's not done yet, but I want you to see what it's going to look like when it's finished. Thank you so much for joining me today in this first of my Two's Company series, where I'm going to be taking 2 different blocks and showing you how to create some beautiful quilts based on how you lay those blocks out within the quilt design itself. So hopefully you'll join me and follow along. Make sure that you've subscribed so that you'll get notified when I put up a new video. And if you like and comment, that really does help my channel as well to get out to other quilters just like yourself. So please be sure to like, subscribe, and make a comment. None of that costs you anything. That's all free, and that just helps others to be able to see what's going on at Lori's Quilting Studio. So thank you so much for joining me and checking out the first of this series, Braided Blessings. And again, I'll try and have this pattern out on my website this weekend before we head out on vacation. Next week, while we're on vacation, maybe I'll even try and do a video of what's going on up at the lakes. We're excited to get up there as a family and enjoy that time together. So until next time, happy quilting.